Usually, people have the right to believe whatever they choose to believe. However, there's a profound exception to this rule when it comes to the oppressed. The oppressed must gain a clear, concise, and accurate understanding of our plight and condition in order to liberate ourselves. Because if our understandings of our plight and condition are flawed, then all of our liberating strategies and remedies that stems from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. This is why those of us who knows the truth must teach African proverb. We must teach the truth whether it fills the room or clears it out. Because we are called to awaken the sleeping sheep, not to appease the mentally enslaved goats. The absolute fact is that our plight has nothing to do with a biblical fairy tale written by our most ungodliest enemies, and that was in fact brutally beaten into the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors. Such a belief is in fact a ridiculous one. And our collective condition has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. That feeble-minded myth presents what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. It's absolutely not how true brainwashing is achieved. Those black people that have been misled to believe that those falsehoods, that our plight is connected to a biblical fairy tale, and that our collective condition is connected to a silly slave syndrome myth, have in fact been misled and manipulated to act as wardens of their own mental prisons. The time of believing in falsehoods that literally insults our own intelligence is over. The truth of our plight and condition is that black people are within a trauma-bonded relationship with a narcissistic white society. The term trauma-bonded relationship is usually associated with individual abusive relationships, wherein which an abused person is trauma-bonded to a narcissistic abuser. Here's how it's achieved. After repeatedly brutalizing the victims, the narcissistic abuser never acknowledges any of his wrongdoing. He instead minimizes the abuse and tells the victim that the abuse wasn't that bad and to just get over it. He then constantly inundates the victim with demoralizing and disapproving narratives about the victim. This is continued until the victim stops focusing on the abuse that she has endured and instead focus only on the demoralizing, disapproving narratives. Therefore, rather than resenting the abuser, the victim instead is focusing only on the demoralizing and disapproving narratives, instead tries to win the approval of the abuser. This trauma bonding effect provides the abuser with a more favorable outcome from their victims rather than having their victims hating and resenting them for the abuse. It's a well-proven gaslighting psychological warfare tactic. Likewise, that same trauma bonding tactic is what the white society has done to black people. After brutalizing black people for many centuries, the white society never acknowledged any of the horrible wrongdoings they did to black people. They instead insist that their abuse of black people wasn't that bad and tell black people just get over it. And in addition to these lies, they constantly inundates black people with black racially demoralizing and white disapproving propaganda about ourselves. This is continued until, rather than appropriately resenting the white society for the historical abuse of us, many black people instead focuses only on the black racially demoralizing and white disapproving propaganda, and therefore instead seeks only to win the approval of the white society. Many black people will even go out of their way to try to show the white society that we're not all bad. This is the truth of our plight and condition. Black people are within a trauma-bonded abusive relationship with a narcissistic white society. And just like within most abusive relationships, the white abusers have convinced many black people to believe that their abuse of us throughout history was our own fault. It's a psychological mind hack. The minds of targeted populations are quite easy to manipulate if they're unaware of what's being done to them. Once minds have been confused, manipulation becomes simple. The mind will even ignore common sense, and rationality falls away, even overlooking hypocrisy and deception. Now you know the truth of our planting condition. And because I teach the truth, they're heavily shadow banning my contents, but it doesn't matter. As long as the truth is constantly repeated, it will eventually prevail nonetheless. Because the truth has a vibrational frequency that's more powerful than any lie. And a mind once expanded to a greater radius by learning the truth never returns to its original smaller size, because the truth won't allow it to. Once the truth has been seen, it cannot be unseen. Once it's been heard, it cannot be unheard. Therefore, the truth is literally like a virus to the system of white supremacy that sits upon a throne of lies to sustain itself. The truth has finally come forth, but millions of black people have been conditioned to fear it and to hate those of us who speaks it. Billions also refuse to accept the truth because of the inherent call for action that comes with accepting the truth. However, when you hear the truth, and you know deep down within your soul that it is the truth, you have an inherent obligation to spread the truth among our people. The truth must be spread like a fast-moving virus throughout the system of white supremacy. It's how we will emancipate our minds from white mental slavery. The awakening is among us. Start spreading the truth. One love and peace.